Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Page One podcast. I'm Tarek.
I'm Marco.
And you've just heard an advert, as always, for Page One, the writer's notebook. All the information is in the bio, so please do check it out and grab one if you're still interested.
If you just head to the link in the bio, you can hit the late pledge button on the Kickstarter page, and that means you can still get in on Page One when it launches and get planning your next story.
Absolutely. Well, who's on this week's episode, Marco? Nobody, I'm assuming.
Well, exactly, Terry. You might not know because you didn't actually turn up for the interview.
You recorded a podcast without me.
What can I say?
Unbelievable. I'm cancelling my Page One notebook.
This is my attempt to cut Tarek out of the podcast this week, so please give this episode particularly high ratings. No, this week I spoke to Mark Billingham. Tarek was otherwise indisposed. Mark Billingham is a best-selling UK crime writer. He's written, I think it's coming on for 20 books in the Tom Thorne series. Really good crime novels, really realistic, I think, but also unique in each crime that happens in it, but not in a sort of ridiculous, outlandish type way. The first book, Sleepyhead, was an instant bestseller, and
it's a great book with a very kind of unusual type of killer. Someone who's almost
not a killer.
Yeah. He's trying to do something to people that doesn't kill them. But yeah, it's as you say, it's a very nice twist on the normal types of killers you get in these books.
Yeah. So I spoke to Mark about Sleepyhead, about how he got into writing, and the Tom Thorne series, including his latest book, Their Little Secret, which is just out in hardback. So. Enjoy the podcast, and we'll be back at the end for a bit more chat.
Won't be that good, I'm pretty sure.
No, I think you in particular, Terry, will really enjoy it.
I will never listen to this episode.
Okay, speak to you after.
See ya.
Just to explain, normally there's actually two of us that do this, but my colleague has been caught by real work, unfortunately. So you're just stuck with me today. So if it goes badly, we'll blame him, and if it goes well, we'll forget him. So that's the idea. So I mean, I suppose to begin, you had quite an unusual route into becoming a best-selling author. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, in that I guess I come from a performance background. Mm-hmm. All I ever really wanted to be was an actor when I was at school, so I got into that and enjoyed that very much for a few years until it kind of, I fell out of love with it eventually because it's a tough life, and you spend time not working and. So I kind of drifted into stand-up comedy, which was sort of booming back then in the mid-'80s, and was a lot easier to get into than it is now. And yeah, started working as a stand-up, and that seemed to work out okay. I ended up doing that for the best part of 20 years. Mm-hmm. But not long into that, I started writing. I'd always written, one thing or another, stories at school and terrible plays and awful poems and that kind of stuff. And and at the same time devouring crime novels. I'm just reading everything there is, and just sat down to write one, in about 1999, 2000, and just sort of got lucky first time.
And it was just that. It was just, was it an idea that had been bubbling in your head for a while, or did you just think, I'm going to give a go at writing a novel?
Sort of. Like I said, I'd been hanging around the fringes of the crime fiction community. I was reviewing crime fiction. I was interviewing writers. I was doing anything I could to get free books, really. Mm-hmm. And then I sat down to write one. And I had this germ of an idea. I'd read this book called The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, which is an amazing book. Yeah. Written by somebody who suffered with this terrible thing called locked-in syndrome and dictated the entire book by blinking. And being the sick and twisted sod that I am, I started to wonder if you could do that to somebody on purpose, because it just struck me as the worst thing you could possibly do.
Uh-huh.
And my wife at the time, my wife's a TV director, and she was directing a medical drama called Casualty. And she said, why don't you come and have a word with our medical advisor? So I met this amazing guy and spoke to him, and he said, wow, you could, but it'd be really difficult. And if you got it ever so slightly wrong, they would die. And sort of had a light bulb moment, about, what I've essentially come up with here is the serial killer who isn't trying to kill anyone. And that was the hook for the book. And I just sat down and wrote 30,000 words on holiday with the family one summer, and sent those off to an agent in kind of 1999. And some agents wanted it, and I picked an agent. They sent those 30,000 words off to publishers, and some publishers wanted it, and it all went a bit crazy. And that was it. Brilliant. I got it, which is, I had a dozen writers good luck, because, whenever I'm asked, how do you get published? I say, well, work hard and be lucky, and I got all that luck early on.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's definitely something that we've encountered when we've spoken to other writers as well. Is you've got to write, obviously, you've got to get the stuff written, but also there is quite a big element of luck in it as well. It seems to be for a lot of people.
A huge element of luck, good and bad. Mm-hmm. And you do workshops and so on, and you talk to unpublished authors, and they don't want to hear that. It's an awful thing to hear that. They can write the best crime novel or the best novel of any sort anybody's ever read, but they just might not get the luck. It's got to pass across the desk of the right agent at the right time, and then the right editor at the right time. And even if you're lucky enough to get a publishing deal, you then need that extra amount of luck, which is that the book is published well, which of course is a euphemism for having some money spent on it. And you've got to have you've got to tick all those boxes. It's incredibly difficult. And there's no question that if you get that bit of luck, you've then got to grab it with both hands and run with it, and keep turning those books out. But I
mean, just in terms of that as well, I mean, it is, you can get published, and then even it can sort of fizzle out as well, even if you get that publishing deal. And you have been quite obviously prolific with the Thorne series and stuff. How are you so prolific? You must be quite disciplined in your approach.
Yes, disciplined, but also I have the time to do it, because I think I'm one of 5% of writers in this country who write full time. Mm-hmm. So I've got nothing else to do. I've got no excuse not to write a book a year. I mean, there's no question that if you're a writer of commercial fiction, a book a year is kind of expected, both by the publisher and by the readers. If you can write full time, that is completely achievable. I mean, a lot of writers talk about this mythical 1,000 words a day. And if you think about it, 1,000 words a day over the course of a year is 3 bloody novels. Yeah. I mean, your 1,000 words a day will end up becoming 250 good words by the time you've done your editing and so on. But that's still a book a year. It's eminently achievable. You have to balance it up with all the other demands on your time. Once you've got books published here and in other countries, you have to travel to promote the books. You have to go to festivals. There's media to do. There's radio and TV. And if you're a shameless whore like I am, then you end up doing a lot of that stuff, because I really enjoy it. So you have to figure out that's writing time, that's showing off time, and just be organized about it. But it's perfectly achievable.
And when you're writing, when you're doing your, I suppose, looking at the process that you've got, if you are doing however many words a day or whatever, are you someone that will try and bash out that first draft and get it, get the main plot or the story down there and then edit it, or do you edit as you go?
No, I'm very much an editor as I go. So by the time I send off, what I call my first draft, it's 101st draft. I can't write chapter 2 until I'm absolutely happy with chapter 1, and that goes for every paragraph and every sentence. So I can't just go blah, 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 and just keep moving forward like a shark. It's a slow process of accretion. But that means that I deliver that first draft, bunch of notes from my editor, do a rewrite, and it's pretty much done. because it's in pretty good shape by the time I deliver it. There's a bit of an OCD thing on. I have to deliver a very, very clean first draft. Not just after I'm happy with structurally, but that doesn't have a single typo in it. I can't bear that.
Mm-hmm. And does that mean that then you're spending a lot of time before you even get to the writing in terms of the planning stage of it as well? No,
I wish I could say that was true. Thinking, but not. I'm not a planner. I don't really, I have a whiteboard in my office thinking it would be really useful and be full of plans and post-it notes, and it just isn't. I just stick stuff on it. I have an opening. I have an idea what the book is about, and I kind of have a vague arc of a story in my head, but then I just write the first scene. I just put the characters on the page and write what I hope is an arresting and engaging first scene and just take it from there.
Mm-hmm. And it just leads itself.
Hopefully. I mean, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I just go straight into a brick wall and have to step away for a few weeks and think again. But, if I planned everything out to the nth degree, then I wouldn't enjoy writing it at all. It'd be like homework.
Yeah, no, I mean, when I write as well, it's that sort of thing of, you're the best type of writing is you're writing a story that you actually are engaged with and you want to read yourself, and sometimes the characters can sometimes even surprise you as you're writing in a way.
Completely, and I write as a reader. It's almost as if there's an invisible reader looking over my shoulder when I'm typing. Because I'm imagining the story being read, and I approach it as a reader almost as much as I do a writer, because I know that it's not going to have any life to it until it's read. It's just be some words on a page until somebody reads it. That's when a book comes to life.
Mm-hmm. And with Tom Thorne, was it the character that came to you first, or was it this idea of the locked-in syndrome, and then
it was the idea. The book. I always wanted the book to be about the victim. That's always been very important to me. I got very sick of reading books where you have a cop and a killer and they're on this collision course, and the victims are just plot devices. You never really get a chance to engage with the victims or care about the victims. So the main character in that first book was the victim, Alison, who spends the entire book in a coma. So you're just inside her head. I needed a cop because there'd been a crime committed, so I just kind of invented one. And yet he ended up having more stage time because he was the cop, but I never really imagined I'd be writing about him 20 years later. He was just there because I needed him, for that first book.
And how is it when you write how did it, I suppose, to take a step back, how did it develop that it was always going to be this, or largely it was going to be about Tom Thorne, that you were going to write each story sort of developed him and
well, back when this first book came out, the series was kind of the holy grail, certainly in terms of commercial crime fiction. So every publisher that wanted it, when I went in to meet them, their first question was, is this the start of a series? And so of course I went, yes, absolutely. Even though I wasn't really that sure what I was going to do. Now, I mean, I hadn't finished the first book. This is on 30,000 words, bear in mind. So I haven't even finished the first book. So I certainly wasn't thinking about the second or the third or the fourth. But it became very clear that that's what they wanted. So I wrote another one, and suddenly I was into a series. And I think I wrote 5 Thorne novels before I branched out and did something else. And you can afford to do that when you've kind of got a fan base established. The books were very well published and did okay, so I was able to do that. But I had to get the series up and running first. And
do you still enjoy writing about Thorne?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, only because I have stepped away and done other things. Not just in terms of the books. I've written standalone novels, but I've also done, weird kind of tangential stuff. I've toured around with a country and western act, doing a show based around a short story I wrote. I work with 5 other crime writers in a rock band. I do other collaborative stuff to keep myself interested. So that then when I go back to Thorne, I feel sort of fired up and ready to keep telling his story,
And you have brought in other people into Thorne's world. Obviously, there was Helen Weeks in Dark Places, and in your latest book, Nicola Tanner as well. Their Little Secret.
She emerged 3 or 4 books ago, and she emerged in a standalone. As did Helen Weeks. Helen Weeks was the character who first appeared in a standalone, and then sort of she bled into the series and ended up getting her own TV show, for God's sake. Yes. I never meant that to happen. And Tanner's another one. She first appeared in a standalone book called Die of Shame a few years back. And she was the anti-Thorne. You know, she's everything Thorne isn't. So that I just thought it might be fun to put these two together. And I think they're now 3 books in together and very much a double act. In fact, this is the first book that's on the cover. It says a Thorne and Tanner thriller. That's the first time that's happened. And that's what it is.
And what is it about, the latest one?
It's about 2 very different liars, people who are lying for very different reasons. One who is a professional liar who lies because it's the way he makes his money. He cheats women. He's a con man. And he gets together with a woman who is lying about something for a very, very different reason. And when these 2 people come together, it creates a kind of third entity. It's that classic folie à deux thing of these 2 people come together and some twisted kind of chemistry takes place between the 2 of them and creates something monstrous. And I've always been quite interested in how that happens. So yeah, their little secret is very much that thing that happens between the 2 of them.
Excellent. And when you're writing people, obviously Thorne must almost be like an old friend or something. You kind of know, you know him and you know him inside out. When you're writing from the point of view of a female character or anything like that, does that present any challenges?
No, of course it's slightly harder. I mean, it's much easier for me to write about a bloke in his late 50s because I'm a bloke in his late 50s. But it's you know, currently my work in progress, a lot of it is from the point of view of a 5-year-old boy, and that's inevitably harder, but also inevitably more interesting and stepping out of your comfort zone. And they're all acting exercises of one sort or another. I mean, I come from that background where performance is very important, and I feel that the novel is a performance. I've always felt that a very different kind of performance, but a performance nonetheless. And so, yeah, these are a whole new cast of characters. And obviously, if I'm writing a scene between Thorne and Hendrix and these characters I've been writing about for 20 years, I kind of know what I'm doing. And it's a bit more of a leap into the unknown if I'm writing about an old lady or a young boy or whatever it might be. But you've got to. I mean, you've absolutely got to. Otherwise, the books would get very dull very quickly.
Yeah. And when you're writing a series, does it, you know, if you've got this, at some stage you've decided, right, the Thorne is going to be an ongoing series. And do you ever plan a lot of stories down the arc and say, right, in 5 books I want to be there or anything like that?
Not a clue. I can barely get to the end of the book I'm writing. I have no idea what a book 3-4 years down the line is going to be. No, absolutely not. And I don't even have a dossier on Thorne. I know no more about Thorne than the reader does. I genuinely don't. If they've read the Thorne books, they know is all there is to know. I don't have a plan for him. I don't know anything about him. So with each new book, you're peeling away a new layer of the onion, and it keeps the character unpredictable and surprising. And I want him to stay that way so that I stay interested in him, because if I'm not interested in him anymore, the sure as hell the reader won't be. No, so no, there really is no plan.
And what about when there was obviously the TV series with David Morrissey.
Yeah.
And you said earlier that obviously you get to collaborate doing these other things as well. And obviously writing novels is generally a solitary business most of the time anyway. So did you collaborate in the TV adaptation at all?
I collaborated with David. I mean, David and I are good mates now. He was my idea. He was the actor I always wanted, and I was lucky enough to get him. And he was great because he was really interested in the character. He didn't just, he's not one of those actors that just turns up and reads the lines. He wanted to know who Thorne was. He did a lot of work on backstory and all, way more than I've ever done. It's a really interesting thing. It's a different thing. And the fact that I've never known or cared what Thorne looks like, I've taken great pains to avoid describing him too much, because Thorne is whoever the reader imagines him to be. So I don't see David, even writing that first book after this TV series went out, wasn't like I was picturing David or picturing any of the other actors who played those characters. Because I know, I'm looking out at the world through his eyes, so I know how he thinks and what he feels about stuff. What he looks like doesn't really matter very much. So yeah, it was very interesting to see it on TV, but it hasn't changed the books at all.
And How does that feel though, when you've created this world, you've created these characters, and the same applies, I suppose, to In Dark Places as well. They're suddenly alive, and although they've been alive in your head, suddenly everyone else can see them as well. What does that feel like as a writer that has created these people?
Well, when it's shown on TV?
Yeah.
Well, obviously, when you do that deal and you sell your book to TV, if you're lucky enough to get it made, you know that what you're going to get is an awful lot of readers going, that's not who Tom Thorne is. He doesn't look like that. And why was his house in, East London as opposed to North London? And what happened to his cat? And why has he got a different car? And, you try to explain that to change a 400-page novel into 2 hours of television, 3 hours of television, as I was lucky enough to get per book, takes a great deal of change, and things get condensed and cut and chopped around. Of course they do, but all those decisions are taken for perfectly good reasons. Mm-hmm. And you only know that when you're on the inside and you know why the decisions have been made. I do understand why people watch and get frustrated and go, but they've changed who the killer was. I mean, they did actually do that when they adapted Sleepyhead. But you know what? It's fine because it's a different thing. It's not the book. Mm-hmm. So it was just, I was hugely excited. I was influenced by television as I am by anything I've ever read. So to see these characters I created on TV was fantastically exciting. Yeah.
But is there ever any sense of, I don't know, protection or something? You're kind of giving these characters that you've brought up, if you like, over to someone else to handle and letting them play with them in your world, kind of a thing. Yeah. But that's an enjoyable process for you.
Well, you do have to hand it over. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, nobody makes you. Nobody's got a gun to your head. Yeah. Uh-huh. You've done the deal. You've signed the contract. You've taken the money. You just have to let them get on with it. I knew very early on that I didn't want to write the screenplay. That's for somebody else to do because, firstly, it's a completely different skill, and secondly, I'm too close to the material. Yeah. And when it comes to all those cuts and changes and whatever, I can't be the one to make them because I'd never make them. Mm-hmm. So somebody else has to do it. So you just stand back and let the people who know what they're doing get on with it. And then you just, that's the theory that if you just do the deal, walk away, let it get made, then you turn up at the premiere, and if it's terrible, you go, nothing to do with me. And if it's brilliant and wins a hatful of BAFTAs, you go, yeah, that's my book, So you kind of can't lose if you do that. I mean, I'm being flippant. I was involved. I did go to the set. I was involved. Did see the script at every stage. I saw casting videos and stuff. Mm-hmm. And probably even more so, with the Helen Week series on BBC One a few years ago. I was involved, but not stupidly, not to the point where it would stop me getting on with my day job, which is writing the books.
Yeah, absolutely. But you did dabble in screenplays before, did you? Is that right? You wrote a couple of screenplays.
Well, I used to write TV shows, but they were, things like kids comedy, drama, half-hour stuff, sitcom-y stuff, mostly comedy actually, and that's fine. But a full screenplay is. I never say never. It might be the kind of thing I might do one day, but I think I'd write an original screenplay rather than trying to adapt something. Mm-hmm.
And would you ever want to step away from the crime world?
I think I'd find that difficult because it is, the one piece of advice I give to new writers is write the book you want to read. And the book I want to read is inevitably a crime novel. And I read plenty of other stuff, don't get me wrong, but it never fires me up quite as much as a great crime novel. So I would find it very hard to turn in a slim volume of poetry or a rom-com or something. Yeah. I mean, there is so much you can do within the crime genre. That's the thing. I don't find it at all restricting, and I hate people that talk about how the genre, that yes, there are rules, but they're there so you can break them. And there's very little you can not do with it, which is why crime fiction is so popular because it's such an enormous umbrella. Yeah, so absolutely. If I want to turn around, I think actually I've been moving away from police procedure more towards something psychological in the last couple of books. The book I'm writing now, I've gone back in time to the mid-90s, so I'm writing something that feels like historical crime fiction. As long as I can keep myself interested, there's always going to be a murder, probably.
But I mean, in a genre like crime and stuff, there are obviously, as you say, these rules and stuff and cliches, but sometimes that can be used you can turn those on their head or use that as a way to get into the story and take it in a different direction and things that.
And they're kind of what people expect. I've known a lot of cops in the course of writing the books, and very few of them are haunted by past cases or have problems with drink or drugs or listen to a particular type of music. But I don't want to write about them, and I don't think readers want to read about them. That goes to the territory, and that goes right back to Sherlock Holmes. It's become an archetype for a very good reason.
Mm-hmm. And have you ever? It just struck me that writing crime in particular might be affected by this, but has there ever been an idea or a story that you've been working on that has in some way something in real life has happened or something that you've thought, I better not go there, or I'll need to change that a bit, or anything like that?
Well, I've written a couple of books in the last few years that have been largely inspired by real life cases, and you have to tread carefully. You have to tread very carefully when you're doing that, because people will be reading this book that have direct knowledge of these cases that might have been affected personally by them. So it makes you step a bit more carefully. In fact, the last book of mine that was published, a book called The Killing Habit, was largely inspired by this series of cat killings that was happening. And then the book was published in hardback. But before it came out in paperback, the Metropolitan Police then announced that the case had been solved and that there was no cat killer and it was foxes, which is one of the more ludicrous pronouncements I've heard about the cases. There's one thing I know, it certainly isn't foxes. But sometimes the case you're writing about will change while you're writing about it. So it's something that you need to be, it's something I've tended to avoid. I think I've done it 2 or 3 times in 20 years.
Yeah. And do you have, I think you mentioned that you know policemen and stuff like that. When you're developing a novel, or do you have someone or a couple of people or something that you can phone up and say, look, would Thorne do this, or would this happen, or something?
Well, only if it's something really, really specific. I used to be very, very crazy about research. I would just do it to the nth degree and realised eventually I was wasting too much time. And the other danger with research is you're then tempted to crowbar into the book everything you found out, at the expense of the story. We all know when we come across those passages in books, it's like, oh, here's the information dump. Yeah, exactly. So these days I'm much more careful with it, and I will only find out the things I know I need to find out. So right now, as I say, I'm writing a book set in the mid-90s, so I do need to be talking to a cop who served in the mid-90s, and I am, and he's helping me out, because I've no idea what it was like to be a policeman then. I know what movies were on and what TV shows were on and what music people were listening to, but that's something specific I need to know, so I'll find that out. But I'm not going to waste months and months doing it, because kidding myself, I'm writing the book, because I'm not. Writing the book is writing the book.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's right. It's the writer's form of procrastination is to do a little bit more research.
I've spent the last 3 months in the British Library. Well, just write the book.
Yeah, exactly. And then I suppose another question you must be asked a lot is, where do you get the ideas for the various different crimes that occur in your books? But for your second book, for Scaredy Cat, that was actually something that, it was inspired by something that happened to you. Is that right?
Well, certainly one strand of that plot was, I'd been the victim of a violent crime. And I thought, sod it, I'm going to use this. I'm going to get something out of it. So I made it even nastier than what had happened to me. And used it in a book, got that out of my system. It was very cathartic.
Yeah, I can imagine. And you must, but just staying on that, you must have to, do the ideas just pop into your head? Is it, you're sort of in the zone of thinking, what would a really horrible crime be, or something like that?
There is an element of that. There is an element of that, and it does tend to be part of the process that you do have to, there is going to be a murder. You have got to go through that and figure out how it's going to be committed. And there are only so many ways that you can do it before you start getting ridiculous. And it ends up like an episode of Midsummer where somebody was killed by a giant cheese.
That's right.
But I'm less interested in the mechanics of it than in what that act of violence does to people. That's really what I'm writing about. That's what the writers I respect and admire write about, is what violence does to people. But if you're going to write about that, you can't shy away from the act of violence itself. You can't be all golden age about it and have it happen off screen and off the page. You've got to show what it does, and you've got to show how awful it is. So I will do that if necessary.
Yeah, and are you influenced, or do you enjoy watching crime dramas and crime films?
Oh, absolutely.
And things like
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
No, I do. I'm a sucker for it every bit as much as anybody else. Crime drama, I think on TV can certainly get away with a lot more than those of us that write it, that write novels can, in terms of plot holes and that kind of stuff. I watch crime dramas sometimes and just go, "Oh, that's ridiculous! How could they?" But I have to try and suspend my disbelief and go, "No, it's TV shows. Shut up, stop moaning." But yeah, no, I love crime drama. For me, like I say, I was influenced by Columbo as much as anything I've ever read. Columbo is the best cop show of all time. Feel free to argue with me, but you're wrong.
I don't think I could argue with that. That's a fair point. What about? Are there any current crime thing? Are you a fan of Line of Duty or?
I'm a fan of it in that of course I will sit down next Sunday too, but it's just about, I want to know what happens. I just, which of course is what drives all story. We're hardwired to look for that. We always are as a species. We want to know what happens. So yeah, I want to know how they're going to tie it all up. I think a lot of it has been utterly ridiculous. Completely ridiculous.
It strikes me as something that sort of, it started out as quite a contained story in the first series, and it suffered that thing of having to get bigger and bigger and bigger each
course,
series.
and more labyrinthine, and more just where the whole notion of procedure goes out the window, and it's because they've got to hit those big cliffhangers and those big twists and those whatever, however ridiculous some of them might be. But I've watched it every week, and I will be in front of the TV next Sunday.
Absolutely.
But there've been some brilliant ones. I was a big fan of Unforgotten. That's a fantastic show. There've been some brilliant crime, and obviously all the sort of Scandi stuff and the European stuff. But all the classics, The Wire and Homicide and NYPD Blue, going back. And I've watched them all.
They are all very watchable. There is something about crime, isn't there, that people will tune into, even if there isn't this overarching. A lot of TV nowadays is very much, here's a massive story that we're going to tell you over 6 seasons or something. But the crime stories, people, I suppose it's the same as what we were saying about the novels, that they're sort of comfortable in the sort of the steps that each crime story goes through, that they'll watch the episodes of these things all the time.
Well, they do, but I guess what changed very much, The Killing changed everything, because The Killing suddenly, 22 hours, and people are willing to sit through it for 22 hours. And shows like The Wire, where a whole series would be, each episode was like a chapter in a novel. But I do yearn for those days of shows like Columbo or, Macmillan and Wife or whatever it was, where the whole thing will be done and dusted in an hour. And it was a self-contained thing. And it didn't matter if you missed the second one, because the third, there'd be a new villain coming along next week. Part of me misses that, because a lot of these shows are such a time suck. Really, and even though it's convenient now because of catch up and all that, you still got to set aside the hours to watch them. And so I do miss those quick hits.
Yeah, you miss out. There's a lot of shows that are sort of on people's lists, but then they realise there's 30 hours of them to watch.
I have never watched a minute of Game of Thrones, not a minute of it. And I know it's just obsessing people, and I know people who are obsessed with it, and why shouldn't they be? But there's so much of it now, however many seasons, that I just think that's it, it's gone. Yeah. I can never catch up with that. I'd be an old man by the time I got through that. So I've just had to say bye-bye, that's gone.
Yeah. And are you still doing comedy as well? Or?
No, I haven't done. I stand up and show off at book festivals and so, especially if I'm on with other writers who are similarly inclined. There's a show I do very often with a brilliant Scottish writer called Chris Brookmeyer that we do kind of late night at festivals, which is just filth, really. It's just filthy jokes. But no, I haven't done stand-up in comedy clubs now for about 10 years.
Right, okay. And what is in the pipeline then? What's the next?
Well, the pipeline is the 20th book. Next year will be 20 years of Thorne, very conveniently, almost like I planned it, 20 years in 2020. So, the publisher's got quite a lot of stuff planned. There'll be some new special publications and anniversary editions and this and that. And I'll be publishing the 20th book, which is going to be a prequel to the first book, which is the first time I've done that. I've always moved forward, but I've gone back to make Thorne a bit younger and see what made him.
That's good. And was that a new challenge? Find that interesting?
Yeah, no, it has been. It has been quite tricky. I'm about halfway through the book, and struggling a bit. It's tricky. It's tricky going back in time because he's not the Thorne I know. Mm-hmm. He's a Thorne before I'm him, as it were. So yeah, it's a whole different sort of imagination I've got to use.
And how do you deal with things like that? Like, writer's block or anything like that, is the best thing for you just to step away and leave it for a bit and let it ruminate? Yeah. Completely.
I'll step away, ruminate. And because, for example, I've got the new book is coming on Thursday for a week or two, that'll be it. I won't be doing any writing because I'll be up and down the country, shamelessly pimping the book at events and in bookshops and festivals. And I can't write on the hoof. I can't write in hotel rooms or on trains. So I'll just have to step away. And those 2 weeks will be thinking time. So then I'll get back to it, hopefully with a raft of new ideas.
And do you ever have a situation where you're, writing something out and you're just like, this just isn't? Have you ever had a story where you've started and gone, this just isn't working?
Yeah, but as my wife constantly says to me, you say that every single time, and it always seems to work out.
Yeah.
You do. I constantly have that doubt.
Yeah.
Why would anybody want to read this? It's just some people talking in a room. Usually at about this point where I am now, about halfway through the book, where you just feel a bit bogged down in it and it's hard to stay excited, but it tends to work out in the end. So I'm hoping this is one of those occasions. Well, hang on a minute. How interesting, the phone's ringing. Let me hang on a sec.
But I mean, just going back to what we were saying, I suppose that is, writers, it shows that, you're a highly successful writer, but you still have that sort of, not imposter syndrome, but that doubt that happens when you're writing your 20th book.
It is imposter syndrome. Yeah. I mean, call it what it is. It absolutely is, because I mean, you do realise that you're lucky enough to be doing this great job of just sitting down and making stuff up. And yeah, you are constantly worried that there's going to be a tap on the shoulder going, yeah, that's enough. Shut up now. Yeah. But you also have that individual doubt each time you're writing a book. And it took me ages to realise that it's a good thing. Mm-hmm. Because each book is harder to write than the one before. I never thought it would be. Once I'd done one, I thought, oh, here we go, I can do this now. And then the second book was harder, and the third book was harder than the second book. And then some writer said, well, it's meant to be like that because you should be trying to write a better book. So, of course, it gets harder. Mm-hmm. So there is, that constant doubt. If I talk to a writer and I go, how's the new book going? And they go, oh, this is great. It's the best thing I've ever written. That's alarm bells for me.
Yeah.
That's really, you just think you're writing a dog of a book if that's what you think. No, I think you should always doubt what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. It serves as a sort of quality check, I suppose. Yeah,
yeah, completely.
Mm-hmm.
Completely.
That's about all of the sort of main questions that we had, but we always like to wrap up each podcast with some quick fire sort of one or other questions.
All right.
But feel free to expand on any of your answers.
All righty.
So, going back to something I already mentioned, line of duty or bodyguard?
Line of duty.
Okay. Poirot or Sherlock Holmes?
Sherlock Holmes.
Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Trek.
Okay.
I'm talking about the original series.
Yes. Okay.
Obviously.
Yeah. TV or cinema?
TV.
A real book or an e-book?
Real book.
Okay. Even when you're on holiday, do you take e-books?
I've never read one. I don't own a Kindle.
Oh, okay. There you go.
I'm too old. I'm too bloody old.
You can increase the font size.
I know. Trust me. That yes, I am starting to see that as a plus. My glasses are just getting thicker and thicker.
And the last one, a fancy restaurant or a takeaway?
Nando's.
Nando's, excellent, good choice.
Every time. I've got my launch dinner tomorrow night. We are all going to a fancy restaurant because there's 20 people or something. But if it was just me and my editor, it'd be Nando's. That's where we hold editorial meetings. Genuine. is the Nando's nearest to my publisher's office. We go there and we sit in Nando's and we hammer it out.
Have you got one of the legendary black comics?
Oh, I would kill for one. I would kill for one. One of these days.
One of these days, exactly. Well, thanks very much, Mark. Really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. No worries. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, that was absolutely rubbish, Marco, I thought.
As I said before, that was probably the best episode of the podcast we've had.
No, it was very good. And no, he was a really nice guy.
Yeah, no, he was really nice and quite unusual that he has written this big series of crime novels featuring the same cop, but it's not like he's got, like a lot of crime writers might have a sort of 5-book overarching story they want to tell, but he's very much like he wants to tell the best story he can each time, which is refreshing in a way, I think.
I mean, it does seem to go away from everything from Marvel to Game of Thrones. Everything is all about shared universes building up to one moment, and in some ways it's nice to know you can pick up a book and read it and you're not missing out what came before.
You'll if you read every Tom Thorne novel, you'll get to know Tom Thorne a bit more, but if you pick up the 18th Tom Thorne novel, you'll enjoy it as much as anyone that's read the others. So it's good. And he was sort of saying the same about TV shows now. I'm a fan of these sort of big universes, but they do get too big sometimes, and sometimes, as he was saying, it's too difficult to find the time to invest in something. Yeah,
there's nothing worse than finding a show that's got 4 spin-offs and 20 episode seasons, and you think, when am I going to ever watch all this? So you just don't watch it at all.
No, exactly. Well, it was really great of Mark to come on the podcast. Really appreciated that. And as I said before, his new book, Their Little Secret, is just out in hardback. I think it's already shooting towards the top of the bestseller charts. So do check it out if you like crime novels, because I've not read that one, but I have read some of his others, and they are all great.
Yeah, they're great books, absolutely.
Who have we got on next week, Taryn?
Next week we have Tim LeBon, brother of Simon LeBon from...
No, you told me you weren't going to do this terrible joke.
Okay, so apparently it's pronounced Tim Lebon.
Yes.
Author of The Silence.
Yeah, The Silence, which is on Netflix at the moment. But he wrote the book before that, and there's a whole controversy relating to another film that we won't mention.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it's talking about, but yeah, apparently.
No idea. It was a really good chat that we had with Tim. So please do tune in for that one.
Yeah, definitely. And as always, you can get in touch with us by sending us an email to podcast@rightgear.co.uk or send us a tweet to right_gear.
And thanks to Simon Stokes for his production assistance as usual. And we'll just leave you with another advert for page 1, which, as we say, you can still late pledge on even though the Kickstarter campaign is over.
We've not got too long though. Couple of weeks?
Yeah, I'm not sure how long the late pledges will stay, but yeah, get in there, join over $600 and get in your page 1 notebook so you can plan your next story. Just head to the link in the bio and hit the late pledge button. And we'll see you next week.
See you later.